let me introduce to you all our first speaker for today, Dr. Asif Bachlani, who will kick off the event by providing insight into what stress is and how we can identify our personal stress triggers. He is a consultant psychiatrist and hospital medical director for Prior Hospital Woking and Oxford Wellbeing Centre. In 2016, Dr. Bachlani was awarded Health Foundation QI Award for his project Improving Physical Healthcare for Patients with Psychosis. Asif has also held various clinical and managerial positions in NHS trusts and is involved with the Royal College of Psychiatrists. Asif's current focus is around use of digital technologies in mental health. And a little fun fact for you all about Asif is that he was the film club president at university and would love to be a film director. All right, Asif, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the kind introduction. So you can see I'm a failed film director and actually ended up being a doctor. Okay, cool. So I'm going to try to make this session as interactive as possible. So I know that you've been told to mute, but actually I'm going to be asking you some questions and hopefully you'll be brave enough to answer. So I'm going to start off with a poll. So the poll question will be, have you felt stressed in the last 2 weeks? Yes or no? Okay, if we can end the poll and then show the results. So what you might be able to see is that everyone has said yes. I was going to jokingly say if anyone said no, they're lying. Because I think we've all felt stressed. I felt stressed 10 minutes ago just before starting this talk. So I think it's perfectly natural. So the question I wanted to ask you all is, if you're brave enough to say, what's made you stressed recently? Feel free to unmute and shout out an answer.
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
Okay. So what's making, look, my daughter is laughing at me. What's making me stress is that I'm going back to academic studies after 30 years.
Yeah.
So that is making me very stressful.
Yeah. Does anyone else? So it sounds like a perfectly reasonable reason to be stressed. Does anyone else want to be brave and shout out?
I've got one.
Go on.
Feeling
Thank you, Ahil.
about having to do things that you haven't previously done before. And so when things are really outside of your comfort zone, you want to try your best and, you know, give it your all, but sometimes you just don't really know what to do.
Yeah, brilliant. And as you heard me jokingly say, I felt stressed like 10 minutes ago before this talk started. So again, I guess what I'm trying to emphasize by saying that stress is common. So just looking at an event that I was involved with last year in June. So this was, I think we were still in one of our lockdowns. This is a survey of 18 to 25-year-olds, a similar age group. And these were the top 3 things that people were talking about. So isolation, and I think COVID has made us really think about, actually we are social animals and being away from people is difficult and we like interacting. Given the fact we're coming up to exam season, this wouldn't be unsurprising. And then for some of us who are working as well, perhaps also not surprising. The other things that were on the list were sort of general anxiety about the future, maybe even anxiety about doing different things, as I think Ahil just talked about, bereavement and financial. So this was just to give you some results of our kind of peer group age saying. So I think sometimes we think we go from the picture on our right, which is completely all chilled, to the picture on my left where we're all stressed, but it doesn't quite work that way. So this is my next question to you all. I can recognize when I'm feeling stressed. And my answer would be sometimes. It's got a couple more people to answer. There's no right or wrong answers, that you can be brave and put the correct answers in. Okay, so I think we've got most people in. So 58% of people said always, 42% of people feel sometimes. And I think that's probably reasonable and what one would expect in the population. I think it can be quite difficult to tell when you are stressed, and unless you're particularly sensitive to that and are particularly aware of that. And sometimes what might end up happening is other people tell you that you're stressed rather than you say. So what might you notice when you're feeling stressed? Forgive me, my presentation doesn't want to move along. Oh, okay, cool. So this is a rather big and long list. You can see things in green. So green, I think, are things that potentially would happen quite early on. So you can have sort of irritability, changes in your sleep, so struggling to sleep, waking up early in the morning, sort of feeling nauseous, not eating very much. You can also have all sorts of things like headaches or migraines or backache, stomach cramps, joint aches, all those sort of things. The things are sort of black are kind of in the middle. And I think if you're moving to things like hopelessness, loss of enjoyment, self-harm, suicidal thoughts, or using sort of alcohol, drugs to manage sort of stress, and I think we're getting to the territory where you probably need to see a medical professional. And I guess in the ideal scenario, you pick these things up quickly and then you put things into place. So my kind of two fellow speakers will be talking about that. So next question from me. Feeling stressed is always bad. Got a couple more people to go for it. Okay, so I think we've got most of the answers in. So 92% of people said no and 8% of people said yes. So I don't know if you've ever done multiple choice questions, but if you have the word always or never, the answer is always no or false. So obviously feeling stress isn't always bad, and it's natural thing that we all experience. And it's that kind of fight and flight, adrenaline rush. When we were kind of fighting sort of tigers or running away from mammoths, it's perfectly reasonable. We want to get stressed and have our adrenaline pumping because we're trying to protect ourselves. And obviously we're not always fighting tigers or mammoths nowadays. So things are different, and different things cause us to make ourselves feel stressed. So you have probably all seen this, and I just Googled in stress performance into Google, and this is the graph I like most. It's like hundreds of versions of this. And in essence, you get to a point where actually some stress, perhaps in revision time or coming up before a test or driving test or a presentation, in fact, can help you keep focused and making sure that you do your best performance. And I'm somebody who's last minute, so I need the stress of getting things done. So I wrote this talk a day before, because that's what I kind of need, that kind of stress level to get things done. But it was a peak kind of performance, and once you get past that point, that's when things start going wrong, and some of the things that you've seen before around sleep and being irritable and snappy and things like that. And when you get to this sort of stage, you get to the words that you probably all heard about, burnout and breakdown. And again, this is potentially where you start getting mentally unwell and need to go and see a doctor or a psychiatrist or a psychologist. So just some take-home points, just thinking generally about things and things that might make us all stressed. So you may have seen this again. This is from The Economist in 2017, talking about various social media platforms. I love Twitter. I'm always on Twitter. In fact, I was on Twitter 10 minutes before the talk. So I'm not trying to preach, but it's just thinking about that actually some of these things can be bad for us, and to think about how much we use this stuff, and there's a tendency to compare. So, and I think there's also a tendency that we will present our best selves on these sort of social media platforms. So just to be aware of, and then you can see pretty much all of them are pretty bad for sleep. You can see some from bullying, and then you get anxiety and depression. But that's not to say that social media is all bad, and obviously you can see things at the bottom are good, but something to be aware of. Again, I'm not trying to steal the thunder from the other speakers, but just to be thinking about general tips about staying well, and I guess even to a certain degree managing stress. So I think what COVID has taught us is we need our structure. and often university or work or whatever we do during the day provides that structure. And when you take that away from people, it can really affect one's mental health. So just to think about that, sleep's really, really important. And I'm a really big fan of mindfulness. I will share some potential mindfulness options that you can go into. I think the other thing to say that's really important is asking for help is not a sign of weakness. And that might be speaking to your friends or family. And again, if things are getting worse, that can be healthcare professionals as well. But it's not us, it's not weak. It is saying that I'm struggling or things are difficult and I need some help. And it can be just having a chat with a friend. It doesn't have to be with a healthcare professional at all. There are lots of different ways of getting support. And as I mentioned before, there's lots of online resources. And then obviously if things are getting more serious and you're tipping into mental illnesses, that's when you go and see healthcare professionals. So that's GPs. You can get referred for counselling or psychological work, and then you get to people like me at community mental health teams where you'll see a psychiatrist and psychologist where they'll offer you sort of different types of therapy. So as I said, I'm a really big fan of mindfulness, and I'd really strongly encourage you to do it if you're not doing it already. I describe mindfulness as the gym for your mind. So we're all walking or doing exercise or whatever we're doing for our body, but what do we do for our mind? And for me, mindfulness is that way. And there's different types of mindfulness, but I'm a really big fan of guided mindfulness. And the analogy is it's like going to the gym by yourself or going to the gym with a personal trainer. So guided mindfulness is somebody talking to you on an app, and it helps you to distract yourself. It doesn't have to be for a long time. If you're feeling anxious, for example, it can just be for a couple of minutes. It's about trying to kind of get your mind focused away from what's making you feel stressed, and focusing on the here and now. People do pay for mindfulness apps, but I don't think there's any reason to do that. There's enough free content on most apps. So my favorite ones are Insight Timer, and the reason I like that one is it's for all age groups. So my children use mindfulness, and my youngest is 6 years old, so she loves mindfulness. It's part of her routine. If you're fortunate enough to live in London, and it may be available in other parts of the country, but definitely in London, and that's where I've worked previously, which is why I know about it, is this website, and it offers mindfulness, it offers psychological treatments for sleep and computerized CBT. So it's free, and as long as you put a postcode in that's London based, you can access it. The other thing that is often true, and perhaps maybe not of your age group, but it'd be interesting to see what you think about this, is this, and so this is Shawn Mendes. If you don't know, probably you don't, you're cooler than me, so you'll definitely know that. So it's just saying that actually men or young men are particularly bad at asking for help. Women seem to be more comfortable around it. Slight stereotype, but that's generally true. And actually, as men, it's not weak to ask for help, and please do ask for help. And then this is the last thing. So I mentioned I'm a fan of Twitter. I saw this yesterday on Twitter, and I thought, oh, I have to add this in. So this is from a trainee psychologist in Sussex. And she talks about a stress bucket, which basically means stress is part of life, but we have to figure out ways of reducing stress as well. And it's a constant flow. And as long as you've got holes in your bucket dripping out the stress, then you should be okay. Thank you very much. Hope you found it helpful.